So there are a few signs I see as a financial advisor where I could tell that someone has enough to retire early, even if it doesn't feel like it. I'm going to walk you through each one so that you can recognize if you might be ready or if you might unknowingly be making a costly mistake. But I want to start by helping you understand why you might be feeling unsure whether you even have enough. And a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking they don't have enough to retire comfortably. And it's a common belief, especially because we're constantly hearing about how most Americans in their 50s are behind on retirement savings. For example, the average 401k balance for someone in their 50s is a little over $212,000, according to Fidelity. But that number doesn't tell the full story. It's actually skewed because a few larger accounts, really what's important is the median balance. It's a lot more realistic. And that balance is around $64,000. And to make matters worse, 20% of adults aged 50 and over have no retirement savings at all. Now, if you're watching this, you're most likely doing better than most, or you're trying to do better. Most people don't spend their time watching financial YouTube videos, but here's where the trap comes in. People get too focused on the total amount saved instead of what really matters, your expenses. It's not about how much you have saved, it's about how much you need to spend. So that brings me to the first sign, the first green flag, where it tells me, hey, someone might be ready to retire early, and that's that you truly understand your expenses. If you know the cost of your lifestyle and what you need to cover in retirement, you can create a strategy that works for you. Even if you've saved a lot and if your spending isn't under control, it could still cause problems, even if you have millions of dollars. But if you have a clear understanding of your expenses, you're already ahead of 95% of other people out there. All right, so now that you understand your expenses are what really matter in retirement, not the size of your portfolio, there's another important sign that tells me someone is ready to retire early. And it can make a major difference during the inevitable bear markets you are gonna face throughout your retirement. Now, you've probably heard of the 4% rule, which has been a common guideline for how much you can withdraw from a portfolio each year in retirement. And it was based on a study from 1994 that basically back-tested all these different market scenarios historically with a 50% stock and bond portfolio. And they found that 4% as far as withdrawal rate had an extremely high success rate of never running out of money over a 30-year retirement period. But here's where we find that the problem lies. Using a static 4% rule could mean that you're unknowingly being overly conservative, and that might be leading you to think you need to work longer or think you actually need more saved than you actually do. Now, for example, this chart, and I talked about this in the last video I made from Income Lab, shows that historically sustainable withdrawal rates are rarely below 5%. All these ups and downs are what have been sustainable during different times, depending on when you retire, depending on when you're taking income. In fact, the only time it would dip below 5% is the gray line of when you need to spend less than 5%, and that would be during the 60s, which was one of the worst times to retire. And if we zoom in on this next chart, we can see that in 65 and 66, it was one of the few times where sustainable spending rates dropped below 5%. So what this tells us is that at least historically, the 4% rule has been pretty conservative. But history is perfect in hindsight. This is the problem of factoring a perfect withdrawal rate when we don't know the future. It's fine knowing what I would have done in the past, but the key when answering this question is being able to make adjustments. That is a huge green flag and a big sign where I could look at someone and say, hey, you're ready to retire early. And it's if you can tighten the belt when markets are down. Now, obviously, I wouldn't start with something like an 11% withdrawal rate, even though that might have worked historically. But starting on a lower end is a fine strategy to help manage risk. And just to use another example from Income Lab, if we look at 1986 and we start with a 4.3% withdrawal rate, as long as you had a plan that can tap you on the shoulder and tell you when to adjust, we could see that we had rapidly been able to increase income over time. In fact, you can add 160% more income over the first 4 years of retirement. But you can start to see here that if you do happen to retire in a great market, you can get those increases over time. So if you have the flexibility to adjust, rather than just sticking rigidly to an expense number, again, that is one of the clearest signs that you are on the right track. But we're not done quite yet. Even if you have the best withdrawal strategy, you know your expenses down to the last penny, you could still be putting your entire retirement at risk. You know, there's a saying that concentration is how you get wealthy, but diversification is how you stay wealthy. Now, most people I work with have done an amazing job building wealth, but my job as an advisor is to make sure they don't have to go do that process all over again. You know, what worked for the past 30 years may not work for the next 30 years. Because the worst possible feeling is getting into retirement, working extremely hard, only to throw it all away because you were overly concentrated. Now, being concentrated, whether in your portfolio or your career, can work before retirement, but in retirement, predicting which investment will be the next top performer is incredibly difficult. Let's take a look at this chart, which shows essentially 20 years of annual returns from 22 developed markets. Every year, the top performing countries shift dramatically, creating a pretty scattered mosaic of colors. For example, in 2019, New Zealand had the highest market return, but then we look a few years ahead in 2021, it was at the bottom. And meanwhile, I didn't know this, but Denmark posted one of the highest annualized return over that same 20-year period at 13.5%. This tells us one thing, and that's that markets are unpredictable. So let's do this. Let's take a look at the period from 2000 to 2009, and we often call this the lost decade for US investors. The S&P 500 had a cumulative return of negative 9.1% over that time. If all your money was in the S&P 500, your retirement portfolio would have taken a serious hit. But with global diversification, other markets were doing better, thus cushioning the blow. So again, if you're concentrated in just a few stocks or markets, you could potentially hit a home run, or you could strike out. If someone is in their working years, I'm far less worried. But if someone's nearing retirement, it's wise to recognize that it could be a very costly mistake, especially if you're taking income from your portfolio. Those market downturns can be pretty detrimental. This is why if you have a diversified portfolio, at least you're starting to put a strategy together to diversify, that is a major green flag for me. Being diversified globally creates a more stable and consistent income experience, because when one market underperforms, another may be thriving, helping you protect your income, and ensures you're not just relying on what worked in the past, but you're prepared for whatever the market throws your way. So what does this all mean for you? It means that retirement is not just about hitting a certain savings number or following outdated rules. It's about understanding the big picture, your expenses, flexibility, and diversification. These are, for me at least, the three biggest green flags that show me as a financial advisor that someone is in the ballpark of retiring early. What matters most is being adaptable, having a clear understanding of what you need to live on, and making sure your investments are working in a way that protects your future. So if you can say yes to all these three signs, you might have more than enough to retire early and enjoy the freedom that you've worked so hard on, even if it doesn't feel like it. But there are a few things I've noticed with my clients on the non-financial side that has helped them enjoy life more. And it wasn't something they added to their plate. It was actually something that they stopped doing. So watch this video to find out what my clients stopped doing in order to enjoy life more in their 50s. Once again, this is Matt Calcagno, certified financial planner and advisor. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys on the next one.